Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 meeting of the Milton, Massachusetts Select Board. On July 16th, 2022, Governor Baker signed into law an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, which, among other things, extends the expiration of the provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31, 2023. The act does not make any new changes to the open meeting law other than extending the expiration date of the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings from July 15, 2022 to March 31, 2023. So our meeting is called to order, and I'm Arthur Doyle, serving this year as your Select Board Chair, and we will introduce the other members of the Select Board beginning with Vice Chairman Zulus.
Mike Zulus, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Aaron Bradley, member.
Roxanne Musto, member.
Thank you all. Board Secretary Wells is unable to attend due to a pre-existing conflict from when we changed our schedule to Tuesday nights. He has requested that since he would like to be a discussant in article number 11 on the agenda, which is the youth issues, including youth task force, that item be deferred. And we are honoring his request, and we'll get back out as quickly as possible with a date to have that on our agenda as previously promised. Two other items are being deferred this evening. Item number 8, which was a review of application for sign-free corridors in the town of Milton, and executive session item number 19. So there will be no executive session this evening. With those bases covered, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 3 on our agenda is public comment. Just a reminder, Milton citizens are invited to public comment on any agenda item. We have 15 minutes on the clock for public comment, with each person wishing to speak having up to 3 minutes with which to do so. So at this time, we will go to the participants and see if there are any hands raised for public comment.
Okay, we have one, Diane DeTullio Agostino.
Okay, would you please promote Diane? Her hand is raised. Diane, can you hear us?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. You are recognized, Diane.
So first of all, I'd like to comment. The reason I raised my hand when the meeting was starting, I had not logged on to your Zoom meetings, and I cannot locate, Diane DeTullio Agostino, town meeting member, but I'm also chair of the Commission on Disability. And Zoom provides a transcript button for closed captioning, should anyone be hard of hearing. So I was raising my hand initially to ask that button be turned on. It should be used. I don't believe there's any extra charge or anything to do that, but it assists a lot of residents who might be hard of hearing or in fact deaf. So I don't know who your technical person is.
Right. Sean, could you hear Diane's request, please?
I did. I'm looking into it right now.
Thank you. So while Sean's doing that, Diane, would you want to wait until we have a response for him, or would you like to proceed?
Yes, I'd like to wait just to be sure everyone could hear it, so you can go to the next person for the citizen speak.
Okay, until that moment, second person would be John David Corey.
John David,
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
we can, and you are recognized, John David.
Okay, John David Corey, 1452 Canton Avenue here in Milton. And I spoke in front of the select board on September the 20th. The chair was gracious enough to give me a platform to discuss traffic-wide, traffic calming needs and opportunities. And I put together a whole presentation. I'm not going to go through it now, but I wanted to thank you for the opportunity, A, but B, to tell you that I have received so many emails, Facebook messages, cards in the mail from people that I've never met in the town, thanking me for my advocacy in a town-wide traffic mitigation, traffic calming, put it back on the forefront. As you know, back in 2018, the select board put together a traffic mitigation committee, and Vice Chair Zulus was part of that. And I mean, we had Jeffrey Mullen and Mike Dennehy. It was like the star team, and put together a very robust report. And I didn't know about that report until Mr. Zulus mentioned it after I gave my presentation. And I just wanted to say that my presentation and the traffic mitigation report dovetails on many, many activities in the town should be doing. I left the town with a call to action when I was here last time, and I just don't know if anything is being done. And I wish that there was more dialogue from the select board or from the town to the residents regarding traffic mitigation, whether it's permanent or temporary in nature. I mentioned things like formalizing the traffic commission to meet monthly, that no requests would be off the table, that everything would be taken seriously, that we should hand out traffic statistics on town roads to residents so that they can see how many people are speeding in their community, how many violations are there. And also the same goes for the DOT roads. I'm sorry, I know the DOT is working on, a study for 138, fine. They're also working on the rotary at Chickatobit, but Randolph Avenue, I think that the town should push the DOT and get them to these meetings and answer to the residents on what they're doing, even if they're just timing the light sequences on the street. Simple fixes just to slow the cars down while we can breathe and understand these corridors and how we can better mitigate the traffic. So, but I just wanted to thank you again. The traffic mitigation report that I have read the whole thing, and it really is comprehensive. It talks about putting the town administrator in charge of this project and moving forward in a proactive manner. So I just encourage the select board to encourage the town staff to do so. So thank you for listening to me, and perhaps I'll hear your comments later on when you talk about public comment responses. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John David. Now we'll return to Diane. Sean, any luck?
Yes, I turned it on. I can view it on my end, but I don't know if there's like a master control. I can see captions just as they are on my end, but I can't see it going out on public broadcast.
It's turned on. Thank you very much.
But you can see it? Great, fantastic.
That is fantastic. So I hope you will have it on for all your future meetings. Sometimes, they can be static or whatever on someone's computer. So that really helps.
Duly noted, just FYI, I think every time the meeting turns off, it resets to a default mode. So I'll make sure to turn that on in the future.
Right. And at one of our meetings, we did have everyone try it. You don't need to keep it on. If you don't like to see subtitling or closed captioning, you can just turn it off. So thank you very much. I'm sure that'll be appreciated. Diane DiTullio Agostino, Town Meeting Member Precinct 9, former selectman and former warrant committee member, and as I stated, current chair of the Commission on Disability. And thank you very much for taking the time this evening. It looks like you've got a large agenda, and I just want to let you know, Mr. John Corey has done an incredible job in raising awareness. And just this week, the chair of the Traffic Commission did confirm to me, because we've had meetings in my neighborhood. I'm on Ridgewood Road. We're landlocked You know, when people tell me, well, don't go on Randolph Ave, we have no options. The only way we can leave our house. So if John is still listening, the chair of the Traffic Commission, who's the chair of the DPW, just this week did request the Department of Transportation to look into timing the lights at Hillside and, come on, is that Hillside and Reed, I believe, the old dump, so that they would be more regulated to slow the traffic down versus only going on when a car is coming in and out. So I just wanted to share that information with you, that the chair of the Traffic Commission is on top of that, fortunately, this week. The other reason I was calling in is on October 5th, I did receive a call from a few town meeting members who were listening, and they ended up letting me hear some of the discussion about a potential article to amend Chapter 2, Section 7 of the town bylaws. I had requested the next day the actual language of the article. Since that next day, October 6th, I had not received actual formatted article language for the warrant. And since the October 6th, I've heard from more than 5 town meeting members, possibly even almost 10, of their concern that they didn't really know what was going to happen or what the proposed language was. We have an open meeting law in Massachusetts that the Attorney General repeatedly states it's not just about the law, it's the spirit of the law. And I think that the residents in this town do an amazing job of getting involved and trying to debate the issues. The town meeting members certainly do. And so I think transparency is very important. And the only document I had received up to last night since October 6th was a piece of paper with the bylaw, and the middle section of the bylaw in Chapter 2 had lines through it. That's not the properly formatted. Later today, I did receive amended article language that is more properly formatted, but getting back to the open meeting law, once it's on the agenda, which was on Friday, 48 hours before this evening's meeting, and especially since I had made the request repeatedly, even since Monday morning at 8:30, if we don't have the language, we, the citizens, and a lot of town meeting members can't discuss it. You know, there might be some people who'd like to give their input to the select board members before this gets onto the warrant. So the original paper that was sent to me last night is not the proper format to have an article. And I find it's very, very sad that if the residents don't get the backup documentation that they request in a timely manner in order to discuss it with others, then we don't have transparency. We don't have open debate. And how ironic is it that the Chapter 2, Section 7 is about the debate time at town meeting? I've also learned, sadly, that there's a second article relating to regulating houses that I had not heard of or read anything about previously. So I would just implore that the time be given, especially since it's a bylaw, the time be given for 48 hours notice so residents will know what this new language was, and that the select board meet after the 48 hours to discuss it, to put it on the warrant. Sad to see that we don't have a full board here. I understand there's conflicts when you can meet with Mr. Select Board member, Mr. Wells, in attendance, especially for a bylaw change. So number one, thank you for the transcript. I really think that's wonderful. Citizens will appreciate it. Number two, whatever you can do to help us with traffic and safety, Randolph Ave really continues to be suicide alley. It's really scary over here. And number three, please, please adhere to the spirit of the open meeting law so that the town meeting members will be calling you instead of calling me to ask what's going on when, you know, I just didn't even get a copy myself till late today when it was requested on October 6th. Have a very good evening, and I'll turn on the TV now. Thank you.
Thank you very kindly. At this time, we'll turn to agenda item number.
Sorry about that, Arthur. We do have one more person. It's Maggie Olden.
Okay. Let me see. I don't.
Corrections.
We have two hands. We have Maggie Oldfield and Elizabeth O'Connor. So let's recognize Maggie Oldfield at this time.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
We can, Maggie. Welcome.
Oh, thanks. So, hi, I'm Maggie Oldfield. I live at 397 Hillside, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 5. I reached out to Mr. Doyle today about the proposed article that deletes Section 7 of Chapter 2 of our bylaws, and he suggested I speak tonight during Citizens Speak because there won't be an opportunity later during your discussion. I'm not in support of this change. I've watched your discussions on this, and I believe that it has not been presented clearly or vetted appropriately. The whole process surrounding this appears to be somewhat sloppy. I do not support this for several reasons. One, the need for the deletion of this section has yet to be proven. At your last meeting, our moderator reported that town meeting members speak for an average of 3 minutes. This does not appear to be problematic. As a town meeting member for 8 years, I understand that at some meetings, the discussions can be pretty tiresome. And our last town meeting was pretty painful to sift through and became quite vindictive. But even as a subject of that vindictiveness, I don't think it's enough to warrant this change. In choosing to become a town meeting member, I choose to do all that is required, including listening to those who speak on the other side of the issue. It is the job I signed up for, no matter how long it takes. Number two, the process of this article is being presented is out of the norm. It has not followed the procedures as our bylaws dictate. It's not the responsibility of the warrant committee to vet this with residents, as suggested at your last meeting. In fact, their meeting structure does not include a citizen speak. Their job is to discuss its merits with the electeds and with town staff. Their job is to make an opinion of the article for the benefit of the town meeting members. And thirdly, most importantly, I'm afraid that the deletion of this section will limit voices. The composition of town meeting changes every year. People come and people go. My fear is this change will allow for the vote of the majority at that time to be pushed through with limited debate. As it exists, this section makes it equal for each and every citizen to be heard. The pace in which this is being pushed through makes me question what is coming our way that makes this such a priority now. Who wants to limit the discussion at our upcoming town meeting this spring, and why? And what happens in 5 or 10 years? We don't know what the issues will be, but we do know it won't be good if one side or another is cut off from the discussion. Any majority can push through their agenda unchecked, and it just does not seem right to me. As our town planner, Tim Sawinski, has written, town meeting persists in part because it reflects the pride and sense of tradition that we treasure. If you focus too much on the chaos or the somewhat tedious pace that town meeting can be, you miss the small miracle of history that reaches into the present. Town meeting remains our best and most effective form of direct democracy. It is both participatory and deliberative in a way that other forms are not. There is a reason that the subject of Norman Rockwell's freedom of speech illustration is of an ordinary citizen standing up to say his piece at town meeting. It represents the idea that anyone can not only be heard, but can play a meaningful role in their town governance. And it really is at the heart of our national sense of self. I ask that you do not support this article. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the chair recognizes Elizabeth O'Connor. Can she be promoted? Welcome, Elizabeth. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I just unmuted myself. I saw that pop up. I'm Elizabeth O'Connor. I live at 27 Clifton Road. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. And I asked to speak, and I thank you for allowing me to speak tonight in reference to information that I recently learned from some fellow town meeting members about the article proposed to be voted upon tonight by your select board, our select board, related to the Chapter 2 Section 7 of the general bylaws. I don't have any prepared statement. I do agree with a lot of what Maggie said, and I also have concerns as well, similar to Diane's concerns about the 48 hours related to the presentation to anyone who would ask about the language in the bylaw that you'll be voting on tonight. I did see, I thought it might have been an unofficial addressing of what is proposed in the bylaw, what would be a bylaw. I mean, what would be a warrant article for us to vote on at town meeting. So I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that I don't believe that a vote should be taken tonight because of the lack of the 48-hour timeline related to the presentation to the general population in the town who would want to read the article that you'd be voting on. And I guess I could express my feelings about the article itself. I've attended many, many town meetings, obviously late into the evenings. And I have to say, to be honest, that the debate that would take place with Chapter 2, Section 7 in place, moderated by our moderator, allows me to really fully understand how to vote on a certain article before us. And as grueling as sometimes the hours are, a full understanding of the presentation before us and the vote that we need to take is just very valuable to have that input. And so I am against limiting debate at town meeting, which the total abolition of this particular section of our bylaws would not be agreeable to me at all. And I would hope that tonight that consideration would be taken by the board to push this vote to another meeting ahead in October, prior to our town meeting in December. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have 2 additional hands. I'll recognize these 2 in that we're getting close to running out of time. Andrew D'Amato, you're recognized first, followed by Joe Madugno. Andy, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Chair Doyle. I just wanted to say I'm, opposed to this article as it's written now. And I think that town meeting is our form of government that we chose in this town. And it's twice a year. And I think it's integral that everybody has a say. And if in fact what Ms. Oldfield said, the average comment is 3 minutes, I don't really see the need to limit people. I am a town meeting member, and I take it seriously, and I think most town meeting members do as well, and really would like to be fully heard. And I think this article may hamper that and hamper that enthusiasm. This town is I think it's special, and I think it's special because the town meeting members are involved, and a lot of citizens are involved in local politics and want to do better for the town. So I urge you guys not to vote for this article as it's written, and to leave it alone. It's we meet twice a year, sometimes more, and sure, sometimes they go long and other times they don't. But I think the process is an important one, and I'd like to see it stay the same. So thank you for my time.
You're welcome. Thank you. At this time, we'll recognize our final speaker for public comment, Joe Madugno. Joe, are you with us and can you hear?
Hear me?
Yes, we can. You are recognized, Joe.
To keep it simple, I'm from precinct 4 and I'm new to town meeting as a town meeting member. And I also express concerns around limiting or changing anything that allows free speech at town meetings. So I won't repeat what people have said, but I support the previous speakers and their concerns. I'd like to see this put on hold for further discussion or study. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you and have a good evening.
You too.
Sean, I don't see any other hands, so we'll return to the agenda. And at this time, we have item number 4, discussion approval, general election warrant for November 8th, 2022. Town Clerk Susan Galvin is unable to be with us as initially planned, so we will turn to Town Administrator Nick Milano. Mr. Milano, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. And in your packets, you should have the general, or distributed by Lynn today was the general election warrant for the upcoming state election. We are looking forward to seeing folks. However, I know that we've already had on the order of 5,000 mail-in ballots requested, and early voting starts on Saturday, this Saturday, October 22nd, and will continue up until the Friday before the election, November 4th. The general election is upcoming on Tuesday, November 8th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I will note that there are several referendum questions on this year's general election warrant. So if you're heading to vote, there's a little bit of research you may need to do heading in because of the number of referendum questions this year. That's all I'd like to share. And once approved and signed by the select board, we will have this posted for the general election.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Milano on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the general election warrant for November 8th, 2022, please? Thank you, Roxanne. You're moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Seeing no discussion, all votes are by roll call in the Zoom meeting. So, Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. Item number 5, Finance Committee report. As alumnus of the committee, I had a funny feeling about not being a part of what you're gonna do, but it's in great hands with Mike and Aaron. So Mr. Zulus, can we turn to you as chair of the Select Board Committee on Finance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee of the Select Board met on Friday, October 14th, and considered several applications for the small business grants that the Select Board set aside from the ARPA funding. And just as a recap, we had an application process throughout the late spring and early summer that ended on June 30th. When we had all the applications in. We had set aside approximately $500,000 for businesses and set a cap at $50,000 per business for that. We approved several of those applications in July. For other applications, we sought some additional information, and we have 4 that we moved forward on and recommended on Friday. I will go through each of those recommendations for you. The first one is a recommendation for Rebuilt Health and Wellness LLC. The application from Rebuilt Health and Wellness sought ARPA funding for marketing to help restore the business and for training to help restore the business. And they provided backup materials and an itemized list of the use of the funding. And just as an aside, this is a reimbursement funding. So the monies are expended, and we need to actually see the proof of the use of the funds, and then there's reimbursement for that. And so And so we have the materials that they have proposed, and then we'll have the materials for which they seek reimbursement for any audit requirements from the federal government. So Rebuild Health and Fitness again sought $50,000 for these items. We had Ms. Barnes and Ms. Taylor, who I think may be with us tonight as well, if there are any questions for them. But the Finance Committee recommended that the Select Board appropriate up to $50,000 of ARPA funding for a small business assistance grant to Rebuilt Health and Wellness LLC. And again, those were for marketing and training costs to help restore the business and to recover from the difficulties of COVID.
Any questions from members of the board? Is there a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Finance Committee to appropriate $50,000 to Rebuilt Health and Wellness LLC for a small business grant through the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Is there a second, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Mr. Zulus,
Thank you,
back
Mr.
to you.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second small business assistant grant considered was that for Deborah McSorley Design, a small business in town that provides design services, and Ms. McSorley sought for her business various expenses, including computer repair, software, advertising and marketing expenses, missed wages based on COVID, and Ms. McSorley sought this money in the amount of $18,600 to cover business expenses that would help restore the business and help cover some of the losses that resulted from COVID. And so Deborah McSorley Design, Ms. McSorley sought $18,600 and was provided with significant backup materials to support that. And so the Finance Committee, the Select Board, recommends that the Select Board appropriate up to $18,600 from the ARPA funding for small business assistant grant to Deborah McSorley Design.
Is that a motion, Mr. Zulus?
Yes, I will go ahead and make the motion. I don't know if Ms. McSorley is here. I don't see her in the attendee list, but happy to answer any questions. Yes, I'll make the motion that the Select Board approve the $18,600.
It was worded almost as such, so I took it as such. Is there a second, please?
I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Bradley. Further discussion? Any questions on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Mr. Zulus, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The third small business assistant grant that was recommended by the Finance Committee was for Andrews Painting, Inc., the proprietor of Andrews Painting, Inc. We heard from a few moments ago, Mr. D'Amato. Mr. D'Amato, on behalf of Andrews Painting, Inc., is seeking ARPA funding to assist in advertising, a new vehicle and vehicle repairs, wage increases, and equipment in order to help recover from the difficulties brought on by COVID. Mr. D'Amato provided the significant backup material that we requested, and certainly in the judgment of the Finance Committee made the case that these funds are warranted to help his business recover from some of the difficulties of COVID. So the Finance Committee recommends that the Select Board appropriate to $50,000 from ARPA funding for small business assistant grant to Andrews Painting, and I will go ahead and make that motion, Mr. Chair.
So moved by Mr. Zulus. Is there a second?
I will second, Mr. Chair.
It's almost a tie. You're getting closer, Roxanne.
And
Thank you,
and
Ms.
I
Bradley.
think I think Mr. D'Amato may still be here if there's any questions, but otherwise, we can move forward.
He is in the attendee list. Seeing no hands and no further discussion, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes.
Last one's a plate, Mike.
All right, here we go. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The final ARPA recommendation from the Finance Committee is for Lombardi Enterprises LLC, which runs the plate. The request was from Lombardi Enterprises is for the $50,000 for marketing expenses, which have been detailed in order to help restore the business. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong package. Give me 1 second. Here it is. The $50,000 for Lombardi Enterprises LLC is sought for the decline in revenue and the impacts of closures during COVID, marketing and advertising, promotion, technology in order to help restore the business, and increase rent for the patio furniture in order to help enhance the business and to recover from the difficulties of COVID. And so the Finance Committee, having reviewed all the materials, has recommended that the Select Board appropriate $50,000 from ARPA funding for small business assistant grant to Lombardi Enterprises LLC, which runs the plate. And I will make that motion.
And I'll
second
second it.
Roxanne was first this time, so Roxanne moved the
God
second.
forbid the Finance Committee does
Kept
something.
working on that one. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. And we thank all of the applicants for their work in coming forward and making application for ARPA funding. At this time, we go to.
Excuse me, Mr.
Chair?
Chair.
Mr. Chair?
I just had a
Yes,
quick
Ms.
thing.
Musto.
Thank you. I was wondering for the people that are watching, if we could just tell them how many grants we've provided for the small businesses, I think that would be great to let them know.
Cumulatively, Mike, these
So-
four join with what, about another 5 from last year?
So
Wow.
we approved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in July for an amount of $192,240. And then we add to those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 4 that have been approved tonight in the amount of $168,600. I'm challenged on the math on that.
But you're close to your set aside of 500,000.
Well, and we do have a little room in.
You're approaching it.
We do have an additional application that we're still working with the business to get some additional materials to support the application. So we'll be back for the one final application that came in prior to June 30th. So we'll be back with that one. But I think the total, whatever 192,240 plus 168,600. 200, 150, so it's north of 350, probably up to around 400,000.
Yeah.
With one unknown.
Quick
And I think it's important to note what you cited, that June 30th was the deadline for applications, and at this time there is only one outstanding. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you both very much, Mike and Aaron, for your work. They require much time and diligence, and it's very much appreciated by them, as well as the other members of the Select Board and myself. At this time, we will turn for discussion and approval, recommendation for a warrant article for the fiscal year 2023 budget for a supplemental appropriation for unanticipated state aid. Mr. Zulus, can we turn to you And we might see if Mr. Milano has any comment as well.
Sure, I'll give you a brief intro from the Finance Committee's perspective, and I'm sure Mr. Milano can fill in the important details. So we have from unanticipated state aid that has come in since town meeting and since the end of the last fiscal year, an amount of $388,670 or thereabouts. So the question is what to do with that. Do we appropriate it? How do we appropriate it? Do we want to do it at the December 5th town meeting? During our discussions with Mr. Milano and his office, it has come to our attention that heating costs, and he'll describe it, heating costs are projected to grow in an unexpected way in the amount of about $300,000. And so the Finance Committee thinks it's prudent, and actually the school committee had joined our meeting, and they were in agreement, as I remember, with this, that $388,670 be appropriated to the reserve fund in order to cover these excessive heating costs that we're expecting over the winter. And we did have one suggestion from a resident member of the warrant committee, Mr. Funley, that we put approximately $62,000, restore approximately $62,000 into the OPEB fund. It was the judgment of the Finance Committee that, and I believe Mr. Milano, he can address this, that we may want to do that, but let's get through the winter and see how that goes. And then if we get through the winter and we still have $62,000, perhaps we can do it at that point at the annual town meeting. So Nick or Ms. Milano may want to fill in what I've missed on that.
Thank you, Mike. Nick?
Thank you. That was a good summary. I don't have much more to add. I'll just, in terms of the heating cost piece of it, our contracts for town and school accounts were all on the same rotation for both our gas supply and our electricity supply. For gas, our contract expires at the end of this month. So we're heading into a heating season with costs, elevated costs due to just a situation globally. Everybody's facing spikes in heating costs this winter, just general utility demand. So we've been working with our broker trying to navigate the gas market right now, and are just faced with any kind of a long-term lock-in would be at 3 to 3.5 times our current rate. We're paying $6.49 a decatherm, which is a good solid price. Our plan of action right now, on recommendation from our brokers, to return to National Grid for basic service, which we anticipate the winter will start around $10.50 a decatherm, and then anticipate that number will rise over the winter. But that's where things stand. So we're looking at likely a doubling of our heating costs over this winter for both town and school facilities. And in the spring, throughout this whole process, and especially in the spring, we'll be looking to lock in long-term and hopefully gain some savings at that time if the market settles down a little bit once we get through the demand of this winter. So it's an unfortunate timing. I will note that our electricity contract is locked in through till next November. So at the same time that we're back out trying to do gas, we will be out looking for electricity, and hopefully we fare a little bit better on the electricity front than we are facing right now on gas.
Thank you both. Any questions, or either Mr. Zulus or Mr. Milano from other members of the board? Seeing none, we do have a motion to this item.
So I think, Mr. Chair, the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to include on the warrant an article to appropriate $388,670 from unanticipated state aid to the reserve fund for these increased heating costs. And so our recommendation is to include a warrant. And so I think that's the motion, which is a motion to include on the warrant an article to that effect, and then we'll have to have town council draft the article.
Great, thank you.
I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. It's moved and seconded. Any questions, comment? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Next item is discussion update fiscal year 2024 budget and budget calendar. Mr. Milano, do you want to do some introductory comments on this, and then we can turn to the members of the Finance Committee?
Sure. So where we're at is we're still working through some prep work on the fiscal 2024 budget, working on our financial forecast, both in terms of revenues and expenses. We're hoping to regroup with the Select Board Finance Committee as well as the counterparts over on the school committee to have a further conversation in the coming weeks. And we are working at the same time to have everything out to department heads pretty quickly thereafter, or at the same time, just kind of keep things moving forward on that fiscal 2024 budget. I'll also note that the capital budget process is well underway. Capital budget requests are due back to our office by November 1st, at which point we'll regroup with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee to review those capital requests. So we're at the beginning of our budget season here, but I'm about to kick everything off with both the Select Board Finance Committee as well as our department heads.
Thank you. Mike, Aaron, any follow-up comments to those of Nick? Thank you.
I don't have any, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think our view in the meeting was that this calendar made good sense.
The final sub-item for this agenda item on finance is a discussion and an update on the ARPA American Rescue Plan funding status. Mike, can we turn to you?
Sure, and again, I can introduce it, and then Nick can fill in what I miss. So as a recap, we had two sources of ARPA funding. We had direct funding to the town in the amount of about $2.8 million, and then we have funding from Norfolk County in the amount of about $5.3 million. Of that, on the town side, we have appropriated most of the $2.8 million. There's a negligible amount left. However, Nick will explain that we may be able to support some of the items that have been appropriated for that funding with other funding, and so we may have some additional funding on the town side. On the Norfolk County side, we have north of $500,000 that has not been appropriated. So there are really two ways to go with that. We can move forward and fund additional projects. We can hold some in advance over the next year or so. We don't have to appropriate it until, I believe, December 31st, 2024. Or we can move forward and appropriate it with the hope that if there is additional funding available in Norfolk County, we'd have an opportunity for that. Norfolk County has told us in the past that if there is some funding allocated to municipalities that is not utilized, it'll go back into the bucket for municipalities that want to utilize additional funding. So there's a few ways to go with this, but let me let Nick be a lot more clear than I was on that.
Okay, before going to Nick, Aaron from the Finance Committee, anything you would like to add?
No, I would like Nick to clarify all of that.
Well, you are popular, Nick.
I think, yeah, no, I agree, broad strokes. That's about right what we have left over. So we have $250,000 from, I'll take an even further step back. The two buckets, for lack of a better description, one came from the Treasury through Norfolk County, one came from the Treasury direct to the town of Milton. The money that came from the Treasury direct to the town of Milton is essentially money that the town can use in any way that is a governmental purpose. So we have a lot of flexibility about that money. The money that we received from Norfolk County has a little bit more strings attached where it can only be used in accordance with the federal legislation that passed. So a little bit tighter rules. In terms of the $250,000 that Mr. Zulus is referencing, that we might be able to move to a different account. That is $250,000 for COVID testing, which is an eligible cost to be covered by FEMA, which we are moving towards applying for potentially as soon as next week. So we hope to hear back on that pretty quickly, and that would open up an additional $250,000 on the town's more flexible spending side. One other thing I would just note that we're doing now is we're going back through all of the so-called appropriations and programs that we've identified for funding, just to make sure the money has been spent or is continued to be needed, and just so we can get an actual up-to-date current accounting of where exactly that money is in terms of what may be able to be reallocated to other programming if that's an opportunity. So we can really nail down what is available for us as we approach this budget season and future budget seasons, and just kind of strategize the best way to put that money in places where it'll do the best good.
Thank you. Is there going to be a plan to elicit candidate projects in the near future so that we can build an inventory of work to be done? Nick and I discussed one possibility yesterday afternoon. I suspect, Nick, you'll be going out to the departments to find out what they want. And if indeed we are going to do a spending or an allocation of the remaining funds by the end of 2024 and go into the pool, we will need to have possibilities at the ready to go after those dollars, because it could very well be in a first in, first out type of approach with Norfolk County at that time, if that is the direction that we take.
Agreed. And I just to add to that is, I think that's where some of our long-term planning comes into play, as well as especially the capital budget in terms of eliciting those ideas. Maybe something that the capital budget doesn't think can be funded this year is something that we can look towards ARPA. So I think we're gathering those ideas throughout some of our ongoing discussions and initiatives elsewhere. And folks have ideas, I'm all ears and happy to talk about it. I will note that we have a regional managers meeting with my counterparts in Norfolk County tomorrow. Typically, Norfolk County is represented at those meetings themselves, and it's useful to get. Typically, we'll get an update as to where things stand and what might be coming. So, as I get news from the county, I'll be able to share that with you as well.
Thank you. Okay, we turn at this time to agenda item 6, discussion approval, special town meeting, Monday, December 5, 2022. We'll be here before we know it. We have a number of items for approval, and the approach we might want to take is to vote on each one of them as we go through, since there are going to be some changes in what we have on the agenda. Nick, do you want to take the lead on this, please?
Sure. In terms of closing the warrant, I would actually, Mr. Chair, through you, defer to Town Council in terms of whether that vote should be taken in light of the fact that we have scheduled a select board meeting for October 20th. I think the select board can close it now, and then the select board could add a potentially article or two on Thursday related to the PEG Access Fund. But I'll defer to you through him.
Welcome, Mr. Freitag.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Well, I'm nice to have you with us.
Likewise. Mr. Chair, in response to Mr. Milano's question, the select board can do one of two things. It can open and close the warrant tonight, or it could open the warrant and leave it open until the meeting on the 20th and then close it after the meeting on the 20th.
What would be the preference of the board? Ms. Bradley?
It's absolutely up to you, Mr. Chair, whichever's easiest.
Well, I would think if we can, we have 2 pending articles for a special select board meeting later this week. So Mr. Freitag, would that make it more reasonable to close the warrant on the 20th? Or does that?
I think that that's completely fine, Mr. Chair.
I agree with that, Mr. Chair. Let's move that till the 20th.
Okay, so we have a decision to the 20th. Next is an index and grading pages.
Again, Mr. Chair, I have to apologize because if we add two articles, then the index will likely change. So we had tentatively scheduled on November 1st to have approval of the warrant, to keep moving forward approval of the warrant. So I think we can have that for the select board's approval on November 1st. And nothing was going to the printer until after that point. So we're on schedule. We have a draft ready. I just know we have a couple of moving pieces here. And I'll also note that a couple of articles will be dropping off the listing. So I think we can bring that back with a more fuller draft warrant on November 1st.
Okay, that's great. And close the warrant on the 20th, as was previously discussed, or should we do that on November 1 as well?
I would agree that I think at that point, we're not anticipating any additional articles, so.
The 20th would be okay, is what you're saying. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the logic that there's a reason for that, for those who may not be as familiar with it. Next item is discussion approval of special town meeting warrant articles. And Roman numeral 1 is amend the fiscal year 23 budget appropriation. Any comment?
So, Mr. Chair, I believe this was the recommendation of the Finance Committee.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So do we want to
That's the
reaffirm
article.
this with a vote?
And so,
I would say the select board, and if I could, Mr. Chair, the select board has already voted to include an article out of the conversation with the select board finance committee. So the way I helped write the agenda, I think led us astray here in this part, but the vote earlier was to include an article to this effect, which was, so I think we can cross this off as having been completed.
I concur, but wanted to raise the question deliberately so that there was a clear understanding of what we are doing.
Sure.
Roman numeral 2, MWRA infiltration and info loan grant program.
Sure. So select board and town meeting members will be familiar with this warrant article. This is typically authorized at the annual town meeting. Unfortunately, this year when the program was coming forward, when the warrant was being drafted, this program phase hadn't been budgeted yet. So no action was taken at the annual town meeting. This article would allow the town to take part in phase 14 of the MWRA inflow and infiltration program, which is flow into our sewer system, our sanitary sewer system that should not be there. The town uses money on a regular basis to chase down inflow and infiltration throughout the system and to make repairs to reduce the inflow into the system. This year, it's now a 75% loan, 25% grant. I'm sorry, 75% grant, 25% loan at a no interest rate program. We'd be looking to appropriate $1.15 million towards this program to enable our Department of Public Works to continue their I&I work going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. You're recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand process-wise. I think I do. I think my understanding is what we've approved inclusion of some of these articles, and we're going to approve, if we decide, inclusion of articles tonight.
Correct.
And then at a subsequent meeting, either on the 20th or on November 1st, we will actually approve the articles, the actual articles for the warrant. Is that the process?
That is the plan. Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. And then on the date, we did have some residents who who expressed the desire to be heard on some of the articles that still need to be drafted, including the one that we did on the tonight on the budget appropriation that we just were able to do within the last few days, the last week or so, given the feedback from the state. Perhaps if it works from a timing perspective, perhaps we could approve those actual articles on the 1st. So it would give residents the opportunity to weigh in if that doesn't compromise our timing. So that just a suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Milano and Mr. Freitag, any comment in response to Mr. Zulus?
Mr. Chair, Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. I think what Mr. Zulus is recommending is consistent with what this board has done in the past. Usually it gathers up all of the articles that have been submitted. It closes the warrant. It considers the articles, and then there's usually a vote by the select board to actually put all of the articles that it so chooses onto the warrant, and then close the warrant and then pass it along to the warrant committee for the warrant committee to do its work. So that the process that Mike just outlined seems to me to be appropriate and consistent with past practice of the board.
And we recognize that the warrant committee is meeting this Friday night. Mike?
So if we have articles that we could approve on the 20th, sounds like there might be some benefit there to the warrant committee. Is that right? If they're meeting on Friday?
Yes, that's Thursday. That's correct.
Yeah. So it sounds like that might be of some benefit to get some or perhaps all. I don't know. I haven't seen all the drafted articles yet, but at least some of the articles to them. So is the idea that maybe we get some or perhaps all, but at least some of the articles approved on the 20th to get to the warrant committee so they can begin their work. And then anything that we don't have to approve on the 20th, we'll pick up on the 1st or perhaps at a meeting. Is that the idea?
That could be done. That gives us a third option from the two that we talked about earlier. All of this is a bundle tonight, which we know we can't do. The second would be to do them individually, and the third would be to defer to the 20th and the 1st. And I sense that is the central tendency to which we're leaning right now. Okay. Ms. Musto, and then Mr. Freitag.
Thank you. If we defer them, we're still going to be voting on them individually, correct? To either of those dates, we still can vote them individually at that point? Question.
Good question. Mr. Freitag and I talked about that this afternoon, and it could be done either way, depending upon the preference of the select board.
So,
and we could make that decision at that time. Mr. Milano, and then back to Ms. Musto.
Sure. So I'm just trying to be cognizant of where the warrant committee is, and they're hopeful to try to wrap their work this week. So we did put together some draft articles, and I think some of these are pretty straightforward. So if the select board needs more time, I'm happy to do that. But if there's a way, maybe I can share my screen, we can go through the articles, and if they're broadly okay, then we can go with that language, subject to, of course, town council's maybe any legal tweaking that might be necessary. That way we can provide the warrant committee with close to pretty final articles, and they can keep their work moving, and we could get that over to them tomorrow, even ahead of Thursday and Thursday night's meeting. And I'm happy to do that if that's something the board feels like would be functional.
And exactly for mentioning the fact that they will be meeting on Friday night. We know they have a very compressed calendar, and their schedules are like those of all of us. So the more collaboratively we can work together on this, the better. I'll go to Ms. Musto and then to Mr. Freitag.
Sure, thank you. I think some of the articles seem pretty straightforward, and I think we probably would all agree on several of them. But there may be, some outstanding one or two that we may not. And so that's what I would say is maybe couple the ones together that we can agree on, and the other ones that are more debatable, then maybe we don't. We do them separately.
From the nodding of heads, I think we have a consensus in this direction. Mr. Freitag.
Just two things, Mr. Chair, quickly. I think that what's being described is also acceptable. You could put on some of the articles tonight. Again, the select board has control of the warrant, so you control what goes on and when it goes on. So you have the discretion this evening to put articles onto the warrant that you believe are ready to be on the warrant. But also just point out that I'm looking at your select board meeting agenda for the 20th, which was posted today. It's pretty restricted. It only deals with the discussion of the PEG access cable related fund appropriation article. So as currently drafted, you wouldn't be able to discuss other articles at that time. So you just want to, I think you just want to keep that in mind, that you're going to be somewhat limited under that agenda to the discussion of more articles.
Good advice. And Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we have Articles 1 through 6, 1 through 6, would there be any objection to taking those articles and considering those for approval? If we have, and I'm reading 1 through 6 under the, really the listing of the articles in order. I'm looking at under the discussion approval special town meeting, under discussion approval special town meeting warrant articles, Romanettes, small Roman numerals 1 through 8 and 1 through 6, I guess is the question. If we have draft articles for those, could we take those all together if we're all agreeable?
Ms. Musto?
That seems reasonable. Would somebody be able to read those out so that people that are watching will understand what those ones are in particular?
Right.
Mr. Milano, could we turn to you for that, please?
Sure. And once we get to discussing the articles themselves, I can share my screen for them. So the articles would be an article to amend the fiscal 23 budget appropriation, as we discussed, an article related to MWRA infiltration and inflow loan grant program, an article to amend the fiscal 23 sewer enterprise fund appropriation, which we will be withdrawing, an article to appropriate money and participate in the Mass DEP lead line inventory and replacement plan program. Number 5 is to amend fiscal 23 water enterprise fund appropriation, which we will also be able to withdraw. And then the number 6 is the article to authorize the select board to grant the general access easement over the dump access road for access to the proposed project at 728 Randolph Ave.
Thank you.
A note from the chair of the warrant committee to the effect that the warrant committee has meetings posted for both Thursday and Friday and had included all articles for discussion vote on those days. Okay.
And I can share my screen on this first article if the board is ready to discuss it and review it.
Please.
And I'll read it in case it's a little small. So to see by what sums of money the town will vote to amend the appropriations voted at the June 22 annual town meeting for the 12-month period beginning July 1, 2022, and to determine how said appropriations shall be raised, whether by transfer from available funds or otherwise, and to act on anything relating thereto. And I'll note the reason for this article, as has been discussed tonight, it would be to appropriate that $388,670 in additional anticipated state aid into the reserve fund.
Okay. See no questions. The next one. Yeah.
So I'll have to just stop and reshare for each one. So give me a second here. Sorry about that.
Did you have a question on this one, Ms. Musto?
The only question I have is, thank you. The only question I have is, do we need to put in the submitting authority? Because those are, if we're approving this, are we going to put in who it's getting submitted by? It's not there.
Once the select board votes, I'll add that in. I didn't want to be presumptuous about that.
Yep. All right, thank you.
So here is the draft of Article 2, to see what sum of money the town will vote to appropriate to provide capital needs for the town sewer system, including costs incidental and related thereto, and to authorize the select board on behalf of the town to apply for and use federal, state, MWRA, or other funds for this purpose, to see how appropriation shall be raised, whether by borrowing under applicable provisions of law or otherwise, and to act on anything relating thereto. Again, as I described, this would appropriate $1.15 million for infiltration and inflow projects around the town, taking advantage of the MWRA program I described earlier, that 75% grant, 25% loan. The loan is a 0% loan. Oops.
That's the same.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to stop sharing, so I can move on to the next one if everybody's okay.
Yep.
So this is listed as Article 4. I have skipped over the one listed as number 3, which was the one to amend the sewer enterprise fund appropriation, as we will not need that article, so it has been withdrawn. So Article number 4 relates to the new Mass DEP lead line inventory and replacement program. This program was just announced, and it's a first come, first served program, so we're eager to get in line for it. This would enable the town, this would appropriate $300,000 to doing a lead service line inventory throughout Milton for both service lines. Service lines are the lines that connect your house or residence or entity business to the water main in the street. A portion of that is owned by the town. A portion of that is owned by the property owner. This appropriation would enable the town to do an inventory of all of those lines to identify how many, if any, are still made of lead. At which point we would also be working on a replacement plan to come up with a plan to replace those lead lines due to growing concern over the potential issues with lead. I'll also note just that in terms of the MWRA water that comes to Milton, it is treated to prevent lead from leaching into the water, and we are testing on an annual basis for lead already. This would just get us an inventory of any lead service lines and a replacement plan. And this is a loan program that once you complete the project, the loan is forgiven in its entirety. So there would be no cost to the town.
No questions?
All right.
The next item.
As I mentioned, item number 5, which was an amendment to the fiscal 23 Water Enterprise Fund appropriation, that has been withdrawn. And I'll just note the reason we had these on there was in case there would be any additional costs incurred in this fiscal year due to those 2 articles. We wanted to make sure that we could fund them if necessary, but that is no longer necessary. So those have come off. And I will pull up the other article here. And so this is Article 6, which relates to granting a general access easement over the dump access road. I will read it, but I would defer to, through you, Mr. Chair, to Town Council for any questions and a more detailed description of the article. See if the town will vote to authorize the select board to grant a general access easement to USC LLC, a Massachusetts limited liability company, an owner of an adjacent parcel known as parcel number 138D-4 on the town of Milton assessor's map over a parcel of land as shown on Access Road, town of Milton, 40-foot wide, on a plan entitled Plan of Land Access Road, Milton, Massachusetts, dated August 22nd, 2022, prepared by Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors to provide access to the grantee's parcel. A copy of said plan is available for inspection in the town's Office of Planning and Community Development and on the town's website, and to act on anything related thereto.
Thank you. Mr. Freitag, did you want to add anything to this? Yes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. The only thing I want to add is that my office is considering whether we need to broaden the language of the grant regarding the grantee, that being USC LLC, to ensure that not only does USC LLC, which is the developer, have the right to use this easement, but also that any subsequent residents at that property would be able to use that easement as well. So we just want to confer with the developer to see if USC is going to continue to hold the property or if it's going to be assigned to some subsequent property owner that will hold the entire property thereafter, after the development. In which case, I will probably suggest that we tweak the language of the article slightly to make sure that this does what it's supposed to do, what it's intended to do, which is allow the folks that are going to be living at these properties to be able to use this access road rather than the other point of access further up on Randolph Ave. So if that change is necessary, I'll bring it to the board's attention as soon as I've made that determination.
Okay, so we could approve this, Mr. Freitag, pending that possibility?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So those are the first 6 that were mentioned. We do have language for item 7, but I think you had mentioned doing the first 6 first and going from there.
Mrs. Zullis.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve articles numbered 1, 2, 4, and 6 for inclusion in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Zullis. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zullis?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, yes. Back to you, Mr. Milano.
Sure, I will pull up Article 7. So this is Article 7, to see if the town, we will obviously now have to renumber these, I apologize. Don't get too used to the numbers that you're seeing. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 2 of the general bylaws by deleting Section 7 and replacing it with the following text. The text of this section has been deleted, and to act on anything related thereto.
Thank you. Mr. Freitag, anything that you wish to comment on this article?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, at the last meeting, you had asked me to take a look at sort of what had been proposed and what the board had considered regarding this potential article. Rather than simply stating that the section of Chapter 2, Section 7 of Chapter 2 would be deleted, I thought that was probably prudent to just include this language in case there are any other sections of the bylaw that reference either Section 7 or any of the subsequent sections in Chapter 2. I don't want to throw off any references within the bylaws. And also, rather than take on renumbering the sections after Section 7 by way of this article, it seemed to make sense to just sort of put this placeholder in, and then given that we have a bylaw review committee that's doing quite a bit of work, we can sort of hand it off to them at this point, and then they can perhaps in a subsequent article or recommendation to this board or to town meeting have a suggestion regarding the numbering of these sections.
Thank you, Mr. Freitag. Any discussion or questions? Ms. Musto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned that we're having this article in the first place. I think that anything that's going to try to limit free speech and discussion and free-flowing discussion, it goes counter to what our town meeting is. We are a representative town meeting, and all of our town meeting members represent their area of town and their neighbors. Oftentimes when I sit at town meeting and I listen to the different discussions, I often hear things that I never even considered. And it's sometimes that one lone voice that brings up something that you normally wouldn't hear from some people that feel intimidated, and finally they have their voice and they want to go up and speak, and they bring up a good discussion. A lot of the articles at town meeting are fiduciary, or they could be zoning. There are lots of different things that they could be, but it's so important to not limit debate and not cut people off if we can, and to hear different voices. That's what this country was built on, is democracy. And if we're going to limit that and not allow for free-flowing discussion, I think we are serving an injustice to the residents of this town. And so I strongly am opposed to this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Further comment? And I just want to reiterate the process that we're talking about here. And Mr. Freitag, what we're doing is making the determination of what would go to the warrant committee for their consideration, for passage to town meeting for their deliberation and decision. Any correction or elaboration on that?
I guess I would just maybe view it as slightly differently. It's just an article like any other. So this, you have to make a decision at some point as to whether or not you believe that this article, which is not a citizen's petition, it is sort of been handed to the select board to put onto the warrant. And the select board needs to make a decision, take a vote as to whether or not it wants this article in this form to be on the warrant. And then once it's on the warrant, then it would follow the normal course of any article and go to the warrant committee for review and consideration.
Increase that process.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Zulus, you were first, so you're recognized, followed by Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Musto raises good points about the substance of the article. We have heard differing viewpoints on the substance of the article. We've heard a town meeting member, and she purportedly worked with town meeting members to propose this article and is in favor of this article. We've heard other town meeting members who are opposed to this article. And so in order to allow free-flowing discussion of this article, in order not to limit debate of this article to just this board, in order to hear different voices and to hear all of the town meeting member voices on this article, the way to do that is to include it on the warrant so that all the voices can be heard on this. We can have a free-flowing discussion in town meeting. We cannot limit debate just to this small group, but all of the town meeting members can weigh in. So for that purpose, so that we can have a free-flowing discussion and we can hear all the voices of the town meeting members, I am in favor of including this on the warrant for the kind of debate and discussion that I think it deserves.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Ms. Bradley, you're recognized, and then Ms. Musto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me and realizing that I was next, even though I lowered my hand. I appreciate that. My fellow member, Ms. Musto, said a lot of things about controlling debate and stopping debate. And I just wanted to say that by deleting this specific section, we'd actually be following town meeting time, which is a handbook of parliamentary law, which all towns follow when it comes to town meetings. We are unique, we are special. As we all know, we're special here in Milton, but we are unique and special that this is a moderator's choice. It is not something that is actually in the town meeting time, which is what all towns are supposed to follow when it comes to town meetings. I just want to say that there's nobody that's trying to limit debate. There's nobody that's trying to stop people from speaking. I think that what the article, when the town meeting member came forward to talk to us about this, she was very eloquent in saying that this is to ensure that there is not elongated debate where we say the same things over and over again, which often happens not only in town meeting, but here in our own meetings, Mr. Chair. And so I would just like to say that I echo what the vice chair said, which is let's let our town meeting members debate this. I am not here to stop them from debating something. I am not here to limit their debate. I am here to see what they have to say about this and see what they have to say about how this kind of works with our town meeting time, which is again, the handbook of parliamentary law for town meetings. So it's something that if you don't have it, you can order it online. And you can follow along with the moderator and see how we're all doing. So I would just like to say that this should absolutely go forward, and it should be something that the town meeting debates, I'm sure, at length.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Musto.
Thank you. A couple of things I'd like to talk about with regards to this. Mr. Zulus talked about having a full debate, and Ms. Bradley also. This could have been a citizen's petition and could have come through that way as a citizen's petition, which would have got more people in the community knowing about this and so forth. And that would have been the proper way to have done this. Putting it on as a select board article, whether we vote for it or we don't vote for it, there is an appearance that we support this article of limiting debate. And I think that's really important because when you, what was that? I couldn't hear what you said. I thought you were saying something, Erin.
I said, we're not limiting debate. We're following the actual rules of town meeting.
The thing is, Milton is unique, right? And Milton has always done this kind of process where people are allowed to speak on articles, debate them, and have full process. And I think that anything that changes that is it's limiting to the residents. It's limiting to the taxpayers. We often have to talk about articles that have to do with zoning or things that affect our pockets when it's talking about whether we want to do an override or a project. And I think that, again, I think it should have come through as a citizen's petition. If a citizens group wants to put something forward, that is great. And that's the way it should have been for this article. I think when we are putting something on and we are saying it's the select board is putting it on, the implication is that we support this fully of limiting debate. Whereas if the citizens put it on, it's different. And I think it should have come through as a citizen's petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one quick follow-up to that. So I understand the citizens petition piece of that, Ms. Musto, and thank you for that. And I understand that there's some confusion about what people have been able to see prior to tonight's meeting. I just have to ask, in Article 1, with those numbers that were given this evening and the way that the article was fleshed out, I'm pretty sure that nobody has seen that article prior to tonight. I'm pretty sure nobody has seen the Article 2 prior to tonight. So when we are going through this and we're talking about what should be a citizen's petition, maybe we should make Article 1 a citizen's petition because nobody's seen those numbers previously. And nobody has really discussed, authorizing, nobody's seen this easement over the dump access road prior to tonight's meeting. So I guess my point is we as a select board are elected to make decisions on behalf of the constituents that we represent. The Finance Committee has vetted this Article 1. We've already seen Article, I don't even know what it would be, but the easement. We've seen actually this Article 7, which is an Article 7 now, talked about at our select board meetings. This is nothing new. It's not like this came out of the blue. So to me, I guess I'm just not understanding what the difference would be between all of these things. And as a select board member, I take my constituents and what they would like to bring to town meeting as something is very important. So for me, I'm going to be in favor of this, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Ms. Musto.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that we all represent all of the residents in town, and that's why we have representative town meeting. They represent the residents in town. So again, I think something like this, if we're right here, we're having a debate, right? We're having an open debate on this. We should be able to do this at town meeting with any article. And I'm afraid that this will limit the debate of some residents if we say that we are putting this forward. Again, if a bunch of citizens want to do it, that's great, and let them do it. But once we put our name on it, it implies that we are supporting limiting debate at town meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Zulus, your hand is raised.
Mr. Chair, in order to allow town meeting members to speak on this issue and to debate this issue, I'll move to approve the warrant article for inclusion in the warrant.
Is there a second to Mrs. Zulus?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
No.
Mr. Doyle, yes. The motion carries. Mr. Milano, can we turn to you for Roman numeral 8,
Sure.
regardless of what the remuneration will be?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, before we even get there, I spoke with town council earlier and we are going to withdraw this at this point in time. There's a little bit of an I that needs to be dotted. And so at this point in time, this article, I would respectfully ask that it be withdrawn and taken up at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any idea what time that might be or when that might be?
So in speaking with the town council, we think that we could get it on for the February special town meeting. It seems like we, without going too much into the weeds with folks, I think that there's some wonderful things that we can do. And I just want to make sure that we're doing them in the right order.
Okay. Thank you. So that item is withdrawn. We have on the agenda a proposed motion to approve the warrant for the special town meeting scheduled for Monday, December 5, 2023. I believe we have a decision to defer that to the 20th. Is that acceptable to everybody? And it will not interfere with the work of the warrant committee, I don't believe. So we will have that. Let me just check with Mr. Milano. Will that fit with what we have posted for the meeting on the 20th?
So for the 20th, we just have the one agenda item, which is to discuss a warrant article related to the PEG access appropriation. And but the intention was to have a draft warrant prepared for November 1st and presented at that time. So that was the timeline that we were tracking to have the entire report drafted in shape for review.
Mr. Freitag, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. Given those circumstances, I think I would suggest the following. I believe in the Milton Times, the select board had published a notice that the select board intended to close the warrant tonight. I think that given that you still have some work to do and you don't have a date now on which to do it, given that the agenda is not going to permit that type of discussion on Thursday's meeting, I'd suggest that the select board close the warrant tonight and then consider scheduling a follow-up meeting to address any subsequent articles that the select board may add. And at that meeting, you are entitled to open and close the warrant and address any concerns that you may have regarding additional articles, or even, as we discussed, perhaps the tweaking of a few of the articles that are on, like that easement article. But at least you close the warrant tonight and then pick a new date.
Is that acceptable to the members of the board?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to close the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Is there a second, please?
I'll second that.
It is moved and seconded. Seeing no signal for discussion, roll call. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you, Mr. Freitag, very much. We turn now to item number 7 on the agenda. I believe we're finished with all of our business that we had to attend to in item number 6. Item number 7 is a discussion and an update litigation against the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority regarding the condition of the stairs located at the MBTA station located at Adams Street, Milton, Massachusetts. We'll recognize Mr. Freitag.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Freitag again from the Office of Town Council. Just a very brief update here. Last week, the complaint was filed. As you may know, the filing of a complaint is the first step in the process of a civil lawsuit. The second step is serving the complaint, and serving the complaint was accomplished today by constable. There'll be what's called a return of service that's filed with the court that shows that the MBTA was served, and then the MBTA will have 20 days to respond to the complaint under the rules.
Any questions or comments on this item beyond what those made by Mr. Freitag, Mr. Zulus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Freitag, after we get a response from the MBTA, do we have a plan to get into court to seek a mandamus and to seek a preliminary injunction? Do we intend to file for I don't know if it's a short order. I don't remember my litigation, if it's a short order notice or motion for preliminary injunction. What are we going to do to try to get into court and get a judge to hear this?
Right. So, obviously, Mr. Zulus, we have executive session available to us for litigation strategy, but certainly under the rules, the town asked for preliminary injunction in the complaint. We could file a motion now, service having completed the complaint, to seek that injunctive relief immediately. So that's certainly an option. And we can also see how the T responds. In a case like this, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we hear from the T before that 20-day deadline runs out, so we can kind of plan our strategy accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Freitag, for that update, and Mr. Zulus for your question. Agenda item number 8 has been deferred. So we'll go to agenda item number 9, which is discussion approval, amendment to the project funding agreement memorandum of understanding between the town of Milton and the Milton Animal League for the animal shelter project. And we all had the documents on that. Mr. Freitag, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Chair, Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. So you may recall that at your last meeting, there was an agenda item regarding an amendment to these 2 documents, to the memorandum of understanding and the funding agreement. My office, in consultation with Tim Zawinski and the planning department, determined that it was best to step it back and actually develop a thorough amendment to both those documents that would reflect the current stage of the project, because obviously it's come quite a way from where it was when those documents were originally executed, in terms of cost, in terms of work that's already been done sort of on the planning of the building. And so we felt that it was prudent to update the documents, which also, of course, incorporate the fact that there's significant contribution financially now by the town. So that has all now been done, and those documents are ready for your review and execution.
Mr. Freitag, any questions or comments from members of the board? It's great to have this to where it is at the present time, and we now have a motion before us on this matter. Does anybody wish to move?
I need to pull it up here.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Move to approve the amendment to the project funding agreement for the animal shelter between the Milton Animal League and the town of Milton, Massachusetts. The select board authorizes the town administrator to sign the amendment / memorandum of understanding on their behalf.
I move that.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Has moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle. Yes. Thank you. And thanks to Mr. Zawinski, as well as Mr. Freitag and Mr. Milano for all the work in the background on getting us to where we are at the present time. Item number 11 is deferred. Item, as mentioned earlier, item number 12. Item number 10, discussion of the select board retreat, goals and objectives of the select board, non-objections. Let me just say that we had a full 3.5 hour retreat. Very, very Collaborative discussion, spent the initial part. And by the way, I'll just make some introductory comments and invite the other board members to chip in and share their thoughts and observations and aspirations. In doing some house cleaning with existing goals, doing some streamlining with that respect, and to which will be interfacing items that were discussed, and Mr. Milano and I will be following up on that and having a draft of that work for review by the entire select board. We alphabetized all of the items that had been submitted by members of the select board, ranging from affordable housing to youth issues. We have among the items the desirability of a 3 to 5 year planning outlook and budgeting process. Talked about override scheduling and planning, charter review possibility, an economic development initiative, energy issues, a low-income housing for seniors, master plan implementation committee and renewal, personnel needs, looking at new positions, vacancy, recruitment, and retention, something that's affecting all segments of our economy, both in the private and public sectors, traffic mitigation planning, which was raised earlier this evening, and other topics. So with that quick introduction and background, I'll turn it over to the members of the board for comments that they may like to make. No further comments on this item, so that gives us an introduction. You left us with a lot of good homework to attend to. We'll be burning the midnight oil. Some location, Nick, maybe in your office. And I want to again thank everybody. Mr. Zulus.
I just want to thank the chair and the town administrator for all their work on this. There was a lot of planning that went into it, made the discussion very smooth and deliberate, and we were able to cover a lot of issues over the course of about 3 hours. So I want to thank the chair for a lot of work that went into it to allow, there's a lot of background work that often goes into to make a meeting like that successful, and the chair did that, and the town administrator did that. So I want to thank both of them for doing that.
A good team effort by all involved, and it does take a team, not only in terms of that important exercise, but in terms of the follow-up to it. One of the things that we, I should mention two things that we discussed in relation to this, and one is, of course, prioritization. That's going to be a very, very important step, recognizing the time value of many of these items and their relationship to the future of our community, as well as the possibility of taking a look at having a semi-annual retreat, maybe something that can center about the introduction of strategic planning and engage a facilitating resource for that very, very important aspect of our discussions and deliberations. So again, great teamwork. Item number 12, recognizing 11 will be continued at another meeting. Approval contract for towing and storage of motor vehicles, Relias AKIKI/AKIKI and Sons Incorporated in the town of Milton, Massachusetts. Nick, can we turn to you for that, please?
Sure, and Chief King has joined us as well in the attendee pool if he could be promoted. I don't have the right to do so at the moment. This is a 3-year contract for our towing and storage work. This was put out to bid. Elias Akiki and Sons was the high bid at $75,000 a year for a 3-year period. And so the contract has been prepared and is ready for signature by me upon your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Chief King, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Great to have you back with us.
Good to see everybody again. This is a pretty easy one. Nick just pretty much covered it. We rebid the tow contract every 3 years, and basically that contract is what I'm sure you all understand it to be. They tow cars, whether, it's car accidents, disabled vehicles, snow emergencies, whatever reasons the police call them. So we put that out to bid every 3 years. And this year we had 2 bidders, Auto Service and Tire, which is the prior holder of the contract, and a Kiki, which would be new to us. Both companies had similar bids, but Kiki was slightly higher, basically for 3 years worth of service. They bid to pay the town $225,000. Auto Service and Tire bid $201,777. So basically $23,000 in change more for the town if they go with a Kiki. Both are located outside of Milton, but very close by. One's in Mattapan, which is basically 2 miles if you did it from the police station. The other one's in Hyde Park, which is 3.3 miles from the police station. So there really would be no difference in terms of convenience, both to the police and to the general public who might have to go there to recover vehicles or pick up items and stuff like that. So basically, we're just looking for a contract to be awarded. And the only thing I'll say would be contingent on them signing the final contract, which would be worked out with Nick, myself, and somebody from Kevin's office.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from members of the board for either the town administrator or our police chief? Seeing none, we have a motion. I will take the liberty of reading the motion. Move to approve the contract for towing and storage of motor vehicles with Elias, AKIKI/AKIKI and Sons Incorporated in the town of Milton, Mass. The select board authorizes the town administrator to sign the contract on their behalf.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. It is moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle. Yes. Thank you, Chief King, for
Thank you
being
very
with
much.
us. You're welcome to stay for as long as you'd like.
I'll watch it on cable.
Good response. Have a nice evening. At this time, a brief discussion on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, known as MPIC. We had, as two appointments to the Master Plan Implementation Committee at a joint meeting of both the Planning Board and the Select Board. Since that time, one of the appointees has decided to tender his resignation. I respectfully acknowledge his decision on behalf of the Select Board. So there is a vacancy to be filled. I have reached out to the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, Cheryl Tachias, who is a member of the Planning Board, and asked if the Master Plan Implementation Committee could forward to the Select Board successor recommendation. And hopefully that will be able to be done for our meeting on November 1st. And the chair I saw has, the chair of the MPIC has gone out to each of the other members who did apply and to check with them to see about the status of their interest continuing in an appointment to the MPIC. Second is the extension of an invitation to the Master Plan Implementation Committee Chair to attend a Select Board meeting to discuss the MPIC goals, priority projects, and planning for extension of the MPIC. It expires in 2024. There's an extension possibility. One doesn't want to wait until the expiration before they begin planning for the next steps. So we've had a related conversation. In the past, we've had a pattern whereby the member of the Select Board who sat on the MPIC would report out to the Select Board what occurred in some of the meetings. This type of an approach, and the chair is agreeable to it, would allow for a greater engagement in a discussion of the goals, priorities, timelines, activities, aspirations of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and for input from the members of the Select Board to the chair of the MPIC. We discussed this at the retreat, and Chair Tugias is very welcoming of that suggestion. So we will schedule an opportunity to do so. And based upon the retreat conversation, I suggested to town administrator that we might annualize this in such a way that at the 6-month period, as we all remember from Article 13, right, that established the Master Plan Implementation Committee in 2014, the chair has to report out to the annual town meeting on the work of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. So we give approximately 6 months after that, so that we'd have an opportunity to engage on what has transpired during that 6-month period since then, and have some input from the Select Board and take a look at what would be planned for the 6 months leading up to the next report from the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee to town meeting. So that's the background of the conversations relative to A and B, and I open it for your comments, suggestions, input.
I think it's great, Mr. Chair. That's wonderful that we're going to have the MPIC chair here to talk about the next steps, because we should continue to plan moving forward. So thank you for this opportunity to have information from her and from that committee.
Thank you. And maybe there are others where we can work accordingly as we're going through our deliberations during the course of the coming year. We move to item number 14 on the agenda, the town administrator's report. And Mr. Milano has 5 items for us, and maybe more in his quiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the town clerk and Office of Town Council through Kevin have coordinated an educational seminar series, which will kick off a week from yesterday. So next Monday, there will be a session on the open meeting law held at the library. It'll be recorded by Milton TV for posterity on their website. So they anticipate about an hour-long session. So the first one is Monday, October 24th on the open meeting law at 7 p.m. The next 2 are public records, Tuesday, November 22nd at 7 p.m. And then conflict of interest and state ethics, Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 at 7 p.m. All located in the library, and that information we put up on our website and have shared it. So hope to see some folks in attendance at that. I also put on the agenda here Milton Community Electricity Program, just as a reminder to residents. As you see news about electricity rates, the town has aggregated for electricity and has secured a rate at about 10.5 cents a kilowatt hour, which is below where Eversource is presently at about 17 cents a kilowatt hour, and will be much farther below where we anticipate they'll be beginning in January. Those rates will be announced sometime in November. So if you have any questions about electricity bill, feel free to call our office. You can reach out to Good Energy as well. There's information about it on the town website. Most folks were enrolled in the program in the beginning. It was an opt-out program. So it's a good opportunity to save any electricity bills. And I'll note that the default options and 100%, which is significantly greener than regular electricity, as well as the 100% green, are far below where basic service will be. So you can buy 100% green energy and continue to save money. And Mr. Zulus, I guess, I don't know who's in charge of this section, Mr. Chair. I'm good if Mr. Zulus wants to.
Go to Mr. Zulus. Sometimes I miss his hand in that white background.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to acknowledge.
I'm painting a radiator that same color, so.
No. I just want to acknowledge that the community aggregation electricity program was something that former member of the board, Melinda Collins, really drove, and for those residents who are enrolled in it, it's had great savings, will have great savings, and it is a green program to boot, and so it's just a great program. It's something that, again, Ms. Collins shepherded and that this board supported and brought through and made happen, and I think Ms. Collins just deserves a lot of credit. It's a great advantage for the town and for the residents.
Yeah, right now it's if you're a typical Milton household at 700 kilowatts a month, you're saving $45 a month right now just by being in the standard program versus Eversource's basic service rate, and those savings will only grow as we head into the winter. A few other events I just wanted to flag. We're approaching November and approaching Veterans Day, so the town Director of Veteran Services, Kevin Cook, is working on the annual parade and ceremony on Friday, November 11th, beginning at 10:45 from the high school to Town Hall, where we'll have an event. Kevin is also having an informational session for veterans on November 5th at 9 at the Council on Aging about the PAC, which expands benefits for veterans who may have been exposed to toxic chemicals during their service, as well as other initiatives. So feel free to join Kevin and vets for that meeting on November 5th at 9 a.m. at the Council on Aging. The Council on Aging is hosting a Veterans Day Appreciation Luncheon November 9th at 11:30. That registration is now open. And then lastly, if you'll recall, I had shared news that Milton Library received a grant for what they call the Milton Grows program, which is going to be about a year-long program. They're kicking that program off at the library on October 20th at 7 p.m. So that's this Thursday. So that's a grant-funded project all about growing and gardening. So just wanted to mention that as well. So those are my items, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Any questions for Mr. Milano from members of the board? As for the chair's report, I'll be very brief. I just want to remind everybody that we need to sign the general election warrant at Town Hall. So Lynn, would you write for it on each and every one of us so that we diligently follow through on that, please? With respect to public comment response, is there anybody who wishes to comment? Mr. Zulus.
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just to follow up on what Mr. Corey said with respect to traffic. After Mr. Corey's appearance here with the board, I met with Mr. Corey and after he reached out to me and with along with Mr. Milano, Mr. Berkeley, and we did discuss the synergies between what the Traffic Mitigation Committee's report recommends and what he has recommended. And I think the consensus of the four of us, and I'm hoping Mr. Milano will agree with this, but I think the consensus of the four of us in that meeting anyway was that Mr. Milano would really quarterback those efforts to try to bring some of those recommendations home. So I just want to acknowledge that the town administration is on it. They're working on it, and we expect good things.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. I'll just, Erin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I turned my video off so you could see it, so it didn't blend in. I just wanted to speak quickly about something that was mentioned earlier during Citizen Speak, which was that our process for our town articles was sloppy and out of the norm. And I just wanted to say that we have a hardworking team at Town Hall, with our town council, with the citizens that bring things forward, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of those that are engaged in our town process, some of whom are new to the process, and encourage them to continue on. Because I didn't feel like it was a sloppy process. I felt like, and from what I heard this evening from you, Mr. Chair, and from Town Council, this is pretty much how it goes and has gone in the past for many years, even though this is my first year on here. I can tell you that as somebody who served on the warrant committee for the last 5 years, we often voted on things that the select board was still reviewing. And so to me, this didn't feel like a sloppy process. It felt like something that was actually very well thought out and something that had been put on agendas in an adequate time frame. So I just wanted to thank everybody for everybody that works for the town that tried to make that happen, including town council, with whom I've had a long conversation with today regarding the article I was speaking about. So thank you to those citizens that have come forward and tried to make a difference. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Mesto. You're muted, Roxanne.
Sorry, thank you. I wanted to thank everybody that came to speak today, to Citizen Speak as well. And of course, all of our town officials that are here. The one thing I did want to ask Kevin Freitag if he can clarify, because this came up when several people asked about this 48 hours. Could he explain that to those residents that might still be on here about the 48 hours before that it didn't have the information? Can you just address that, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Musto. And I just want to limit the comments tonight, given that we're just responding to comments and not having any deliberation regarding this, because this actually gets right to what we're talking about, which is agenda and notice. The open meeting law, which is the body of law that, among other things, governs how this public body and others in Milton can run its public meetings, requires that each public body post a notice for its meeting 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and that on the notice it identify topics which reasonably identify discussions that are going to be had at that meeting. So the 48-hour notice that's in the open meeting law applies to the agenda being posted for the meeting and the agenda having topics on it that reasonably identify the discussions and the topics that will be discussed by the select board. That's the requirement that I'm aware of under the open meeting law.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I'd just like to second Roxanne's comments about everyone who spoke this evening. I want to thank Diane Agostino for raising the service capability for people with disability. One of our 3 adult children suffered a stroke when she was young, so I'm personally, as well as professionally, appreciative of that. And I want to thank John David Court for his work with traffic issues in town. It suggests that he might, if he hasn't done so already, reach out to the Master Plan Implementation Committee Chair, Cheryl Tajias, and see whether or not this is something that he and she might want to have him discuss with the MPIC as well. With that, we'll turn to future meeting dates. Tuesday, November 1, which we cited earlier, followed by Tuesday, November 15. We're into November already, and it's not even Halloween. And then, of course, our December 5 meeting just prior to the special town meeting, and we'll be convening, I would anticipate, at about 6:30 that evening, which would be an hour ahead of the town meeting, special town meetings time. I believe that convenes at 7:30. Am I correct on that, Nick? Do I recall?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, so thank you. Just so that we have that all for our calendars, Mr. Zulus.
Just to add, I'm sure you were going to, Mr. Chair, but just to make sure we do have that added meeting on Thursday, October 20th at.
Yes, thank you.
Just so everybody knows about it.
Good catch. I need somebody to do that too. Thank you. Number 18, upcoming public meetings. Mr. Milano, can we turn to you, please?
Sure. We wanted to include these 2 meetings on the agenda just to help spread the news about them. On October 27th at 7 p.m., the Massachusetts Department of Transportation will hold a design public hearing for the Route 28 at Chickatobit Road intersection. the Mass DOT will show their proposed redesign. The proposed redesign will replace the current intersection with a roundabout. During the public hearing, Mass DOT will review the design, construction activities, schedule, traffic, safety improvements in the corridor, and impacts to the community. Their public hearing notice does ask for any comments to be submitted within 10 days of this event, of this meeting date. So I just wanted to share that in case folks, I know we're starting to get some comments, so just aware of that 10-day notice and that they included on their public hearing about written comments being sent into Mass DOT. The other item that we listed is the Environmental Protection Agency's upcoming Superfund site community workshop for the lower Neponset River. They're having 3 of these, one in Milton, one in Mattapan, one in Hyde Park. The one in Milton is on November 10th at 5:30 p.m. at the Council on Aging, and we've also coordinated to allow remote participation for that meeting. So those are the 2 upcoming meetings that we included on the agenda for folks. And both have been posted to the town's website and shared through other means as well.
Ms. Musto.
I think Mike was before me, actually.
Oh, thanks. There it goes, color coded. Go ahead, Mike.
Just quickly, it occurred to me on the Chickatobit meeting, if there is a 10-day period for comments, we may want to have draft comments to consider on November 1st. If there's a 10-day time period on that, because I'm sure we'll want to weigh in on that. So I'm not sure exactly how to process that, whether we want to delegate some segment of us or the town administrator to consider preparing comments for our November 1st meeting. But I think this board may well want to comment on what we hear on October 27th.
Thank you, Mrs. Willis. Ms. Musto.
Thank you. With regards to that meeting, a couple of things. One is just to remind residents that you have to register ahead of time for that meeting. So you can't just go onto a Zoom link. So for the Route 28, you have to pre-register for the meeting. So that's something people should know. And I would like to, I'm with Mike, I think that we should have a letter prepared or a vote from our select board on, something to go to the DOT. Thank you.
Thank you. And just prior to this meeting, I forwarded to all members of the select board and to our town administrator communication from Martha Susi, representing, reflecting the interests of, I believe, about 1,300 citizens regarding the proposed roundabout at that intersection. We'll take a look at that. I haven't had a chance to open the link myself, but we'll do so tomorrow. That's something once we do, maybe we want to share with our 3 legislators as well. And that reminds me to go back, if I may, for just a moment regarding the MBTA lawsuit. And I wonder whether or not we should communicate that to the chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation in the legislature. That is Senator Brendan Crichton. I believe is the pronunciation of his last name. So I'll put that on the table. Item 19 is our executive session, which is deferred to a future meeting. And this brings us to agenda item number 20 at 9:11 p.m. I can't remember the last time that we had a meeting adjourned before 9:30. So if it's the pleasure of the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Well, I'm not so sure. I have about a 20-minute speech I'd like to read.
I'll take that as a second, a friendly second. So, all in favor, Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you all very much for contributing, and Nick and Kevin, and everybody who participated in the meeting who's not on. And this a special recognition again to Lynn and to Sean for facilitating the meeting tonight.
Enjoy an early night.
Somebody will find something to do at that time. I'm in trouble now.
I'm gonna read that speech. I'm gonna read that speech to myself.
I'll keep this door closed.
Good night, Mr. Chair.
Have a good night, everyone.
Right.